Hello everybody, welcome back to Board Game Buzz. My name is Carly, and this is going to be my review for the highly anticipated game Expeditions from Stonemaier Games. The war from Scythe is over, everybody is living in peace, and everybody is happy until a meteorite randomly strikes Siberia. Expeditions were then led to try to uncover what was happening with this meteorite, and of course all of the war heroes from Scythe wanted in on all of the action, so they decided to fund their own private expeditions to Siberia to recover items, meteorites, do quests, basically to have the most glory and walk away with the most money. So that's the thematic side of Expeditions. The mechanical side is Expeditions is a competitive, card-driven game where players will be playing cards in order to gain power or guile, and then they will also be playing cards to collect items, meteorites, and solve quests, all basically to try to get the most money and have the most prestige, I guess, at the end of the game. So before I jump into my final thoughts, I'm actually going to be giving you a really quick overview of how the game plays. Very quick, please don't take this as any sort of official how to play video, but hopefully after watching this, it'll kind of give you a general idea of how the game plays, and then I will share my final thoughts with you. So this is what the game setup looks like for a two-player game of Expeditions. We have player 1's mat set up over here, while player 2's mat is set up on this side. Every player selects a mech along with their corresponding mech mat. They also choose a color, so in this case, player 1 is white and player 2 is blue. There are a couple player aids that come with the game that are very nice and very helpful. And then players also select their starting cards, which is a character and then their companion. Players will then each receive one orange power token and one green guile token, which they will then add to their player mats in this location. Players are now set up and ready to play the game. So turns in Expeditions are actually pretty simple. Everything involves this little action cube and this little action mat here that is in the upper right-hand corner of every player's mech mat. What you do is you take your action cube and you shift it to any open location. Then you go ahead and activate any exposed locations. So when the game begins, you actually start on this refresh, and so the only thing you can do when you first start the game is shift your action cube to this empty slot here, which then it shows that each of these three actions are exposed. So that means that you go through in any order and you actually activate each of these three actions. So let's kind of quickly go through what each of those actions are. So the first action is move. When you move, you take your mech and you move 1 to 3 spaces. You can move through people. So like, for example, I could go 1, 2 and decide to end there, but you can never share the same space as an opponent. It's kind of hard to pick up the whole board on the overhead camera because this board is so large, but when you are moving, when you start the game, these lower south locations are all revealed, but these upper 2 are actually not revealed yet. So how you go about revealing them is you move into that location. So again, if I were to move, take the move action, I could go 1, 2. Because I am on a spot that is not revealed, I automatically have to end my movement, so I can't continue to move through unexplored areas. I actually have to stop and explore the area first. So I'm going to collect this map tile, add it to my mech board here, and then I actually flip the tile, revealing the spot underneath it. These upper locations here, as you move further higher and higher and up this board area, you're actually getting closer and closer to where the meteorite is. And that meteorite is leaking corruption and bad stuff kind of all over the land. So as you uncover land tiles, there's actually a bag here full of tokens, and you will randomly reach in that bag and pull out the necessary amount of tokens until you hit the requirement on each tile. So for this tile, it shows 5+. So I'll just randomly draw out tiles until I hit that. And so this tile right here is 5. So thankfully I just hit that number with just 1 token and I didn't need any more. So that is then I would end my turn at that point because I successfully discovered that new area. So the next action that I wanted to talk about is the gather action. When you use the gather action, you actually gain all of the exposed benefits at the particular location that your mech is at. So for example, if my mech was here and I used the gather action, I could collect either one blue worker or one yellow worker, adding them to my mech mat, so they are available for me. There are obviously lots of different tiles in this game, and every tile is different, so there's lots of different symbols. These little player aids really helped with that though. I feel like they really explained everything great. But yes, that's what the gather action is, basically going and then collecting whatever is exposed. So I talked about earlier that every time you uncover a new location, some corruption gets placed on that location. There are some abilities that you can trigger that actually allow you to vanquish these, which basically means you take them off the board, add them to your player mat, which gives you points at the end of the game. When you do that and you successfully reveal this, now this location is kind of more powerful because now you have a new ability that you can activate at that location if you want to. So the last action that there is to talk about is the play action. When you're doing the play action, you take a card from your hand. Your hand is actually just the left side of your player board. So you take any card, your desired card that you want, move it to the right hand side of your player board, which is known as your active row, and then you go ahead and activate, you immediately activate all of the upper left hand side abilities. So for this character, for example, you automatically gain some power. So by playing her, I would gain 1 power. If I had some stars that were placed on the track, then I could actually gain more stuff, but I don't right now, so I just gained some power. And then if I have a red worker, I can actually place that worker on this card and activate this lower ability. So inherently all cards have some sort of power, ability, either power or guile, that is shown up here. But if you do have workers, you can actually make that card more powerful by placing those workers on it. As long as a card is in your active row and it has a worker on it, this power actually becomes permanent as long as it's in your active row. So yes, the cards that you kind of chain together can become more and more powerful. But that is the play action, is simply taking a card from your hand and moving it to your active row. Besides your 2 starting characters at the beginning of the game, there are actually 3 different types of cards that are found throughout the game. So there are item cards, there are quest cards, and there are meteorite cards. I already kind of mentioned how all of them, when played, give you either power or guile right off the bat, but some kind of do some different things, so we'll kind of quickly go over those. So meteorite cards, they usually have a place-to-place workers on right here, which help you give you more abilities, more stuff you can do, and there are certain moments throughout the game where you're able to meld cards. When you do that, there's a special spot on your mech mat right here that allows you to meld a card, which basically means you slide that meteorite card underneath your mech mat, and melded meteorite cards give you certain ways to gain money throughout the game. There are then quest cards found throughout the game, and what these do is once you are on a certain location, so for example this is the 7 central location, and you pay what is requested, you get to gain something, and then you actually slide your quest cards down here at the top of your board. You have a maximum of 4, but once you do that, you automatically gain what is shown. So if you have multiple quests here and you gain like a 4th, then you would actually gain all of the symbols shown. There are also item cards that you are able to, again, play and place a worker on, and you gain an immediate ability, and then this ongoing ability that happens as long as that card is in your active row. But you also have opportunities to upgrade these cards, which means you slide them onto the side of your mech mat here. And then when that will be a permanent ability now that you will always have as long as you upgraded that item card. So if you take a look at this mech mat here, what it is showing is you can have a maximum of 4 solved quests, 4 upgraded cards, or 4 melded meteorites. So that's the max that you can actually have kind of upgraded onto your mech mat. And so what those are doing is those are actually, those requirements, those 3 requirements that we just talked about, along with some others, are actually part of what is on this track, which is called the Glory track. If you're familiar with Scythe, this might look kind of familiar, but you start the game with 4 stars, and as you meet these requirements, you are actually able to place a star on the requirement that you met, and the moment somebody places their 4th star, that's what triggers the end of the game. The interesting thing about this little mat right here is you can actually only place a star once you activate a boast ability, which is actually shown up here on one of these little hexagon tiles. So once you get that boast ability and you have met the requirements, that is when you can then place your star on this map. And again, once whoever places their 4th star down, that's what triggers the end of the game. So I kind of briefly explained what each of these mean, and then I told you that in your first turn, the only thing you can do is move your cube to this first open slot. So after it's your turn, and then the other players go and it's your turn again, you have no choice but to move this action cube up into one of the available slots. Now when you do that, you inevitably cover one of them, and you can only take the actions that are uncovered. So for example, if I were to move my cube there, the only actions that I could actually take is move and gather. If I move my action there, I could only I could only do play and gather. And so you'll have to choose an empty slot, move your cube into it, do what it says, and then it's going to be the next player's turn. Then turns will go around again. Then when it's your turn, you have to again move your cube to an open slot. And so you're just going to keep doing that again and again and again until you kind of have no choice but to refresh. So when you refresh, you move your cube down to this refresh slot. All of your active cards, all of the workers that are on it get brought back to your little mech mat here. All of the cards get moved back into your hand. And that's basically what the refresh does. It moves all of your active cards back into your hand so you can use them again in a future turn. So you will just continue to do this again and again and again until somebody places their 4th and final star token on this track, and that triggers the end of the game. Each player then takes one final turn and everybody scores based on their coins, glory tokens, upgraded items, and then corruption, and then the wealthiest player wins. If you had no idea about how Expeditions played, I hope that overview kind of helped you a little bit and kind of helped give a general oversight on how to play this game. So whenever I do reviews, I always like to start off with the things that I really liked about the game, and there was a lot of stuff that I did really like about this game. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was kind of the efficiency puzzle, I guess you could say, that was behind the action selection. I really loved the puzzle that was behind moving your cube in this upper right-hand corner of your board. It was so interesting because, again, I talked about this in the overview, but every time you move this cube, you have to move it to a place that the cube wasn't before. And so just the puzzle behind trying to figure out, okay, should I move and gather or move and play, and trying to figure out ways to combo your cards with these particular actions. Just the whole puzzle behind this action board was really satisfying to me. Now, if you remember in Scythe has kind of something similar where you get a top board and then a lower board, and then when you are moving your cube, or when you're moving your little piece, you have to move it to a new place. And so it's very similar to Scythe, and so you kind of see similar undertones with Scythe in this game, but I feel like this was kind of simpler, so especially for new players, I feel like this is kind of more approachable because it was just literally all right here, these 3 actions, and all you're doing is moving your cube and covering up one and then doing what is revealed. So I've taught this game to a handful of different people who never played this game before, and it was very simple to be able to teach. It seems simple on face value, it seems simple, but then as you get into the game and start playing, it really is kind of thinky, and there's definitely times where I kind of had to sit for a minute and like, okay, how can I get the most from my actions here? Like, what can I do? So I really loved the puzzle behind your actions. I kind of just touched on this, but something that I really love is I feel like this is kind of in a way simpler than Scythe. It is definitely a different game, so I don't want people to think, oh, this is like a similar game to Scythe, because it's not, but it does have similar undertones, and I feel like this is easier to teach than Scythe right off the bat. Actually, at the back of the rule book, it's kind of like a quick general overview of the game. And once you personally know the game, once I figured out the game, I actually could teach this game to new players by just looking at the back of the book. Literally, just by looking at the back of the book and very simply going over what you do, what each action means, what move, play, gather means. Now, once you get into the game and start going, certain questions might rise up, but it is in my opinion, it was much easier to teach this game and for new players to grasp this game quick. They tend to grasp it quicker than Scythe. The other thing that I really liked about this game is the amount of cards that it actually comes with. Keep in mind, I primarily played this game at kind of like the lower count side of things, but at the end of our first game, I remember looking at all the cards that were out on the table and that we had played through or used, and it was a stack about that thick. And I remember looking at the rest of the cards saying, okay, that is a lot of cards that we still have to go through. I like it is because as the game goes on, there are certain cards that are going to be revealed on these empty slots of the board. You will then be taking these cards, adding them to your hand, which then obviously will activate certain abilities throughout the game, allow you to do certain stuff. And so to have a stack of cards this big, all full of different powers and different abilities, it really increases the replay value for me. This is kind of still talking about the cards a little bit, but I really loved the puzzle of trying to get your cards to work together in a good way. A couple of my games I actually played with a close friend of mine who's incredibly good at games, and she's so good at comboing cards. And so I was able to kind of look at her puzzle and listen to the way that she was thinking about getting her cards, and I was able to learn actually a lot from her because I feel like I'm actually not very good at that. But you really can combo your cards really, really good together and make really fun combinations with the abilities that are on all of them. So I loved that aspect of the game. So if you're familiar with Scythe, there definitely are some similar undertones with this game, just like in Scythe. And one of the biggest ones, in my opinion, is this board that is actually placed at the bottom of the track. If you are familiar with Scythe, this probably looks really familiar, but at the beginning of the game, you actually get 4 stars. And as you complete these objectives, you can then place those stars on this little track here. And when a player places their 4th star, that actually triggers the end of the game. And something that I really like about this game and how they deal with this track is in order to place a star, your mech actually has to be on a location where it gives you the boast ability, and that boast ability is actually placing a star on that track. And what that does is it actually adds a really good tension to the game, because instead of just like, oh, I completed this, now I get a star, you actually have to figure out ways to move your mechs, and you have to try to find the certain combinations that actually allow you to gather that ability, which then allows you to place. And it's actually really fun because as you go throughout the game, I was playing with somebody and I noticed, I was like, okay, she has solved 4 quests, but she hasn't put her star down, so I know she's getting close, so how can I beat her to that? Or what can I do to block her from placing her star? And so it just adds a really fun tension to the game, and I loved that boast ability. I thought that was really fun. Something else that I loved about this game is all of the different paths to victory. I still remember my very first game, I was moving through the board and I really wanted to try to explore a lot. I wanted those tiles flipped over, I wanted those map tokens, so I went really heavy kind of exploring and getting those tiles flipped over. And I remember I looked over at my friend and she was definitely trying to just simply get the most amount of cards. Like she was just trying to get a good engine going, trying to get lots of cards. And at that moment I was like, okay, am I totally playing this game wrong? Like, am I doing something wrong? And I was like, you know what, it's okay, I'm just going to kind of keep going, kind of doing my thing. So we definitely took different routes, and it was so funny because at the end of the game, that game actually ended in a tie. It was a 2-player game, so it was between me and her, and it actually ended in a tie. So even though we both did completely different things, we were truly that close on points that we tied it up. That was my very first play of the game. And so many plays into this game, I can tell you that I have ended in a tie or close to a tie including that first play 3 different times. And so I don't know if I'm breaking the game or if I'm doing something wrong or if this game just really is that tight, but there really are so many different ways to gain points. And I feel like every time I play this game, I focus on something different. So first I was trying to explore a lot and try to get lots of vanquish a lot of like the corruption that was on the board. Another play, I kind of adopted her approach, and I tried to get a really good like deck of cards going, try to get a good engine going. So I really loved how many different paths there were to victory and how many different ways there were to gain points. Even if that's completely separate from your neighbor, it all really felt very balanced to me. So overall, I really did like Expeditions. There were some stuff that as I was playing though, I was like, not as a huge fan of that, or I wish that would have been tweaked. So let's kind of quickly go over and talk about some of the stuff that I wasn't quite as hot on. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about, and in my opinion, it is the biggest thing, and in my opinion, the text on these cards are way too small. Now, everybody who has played Scythe or knows Scythe or the world of Scythe, we all love the artwork. I think we've all unanimously agreed as a game group that the artwork in Scythe is absolutely incredible. So I understand why they would want to showcase that on these cards, but the text is so small that in my opinion, it actually is hurting the gameplay. And it's making it harder to play this game because of the way that the text is. Because not only is it small, but it's actually long and very narrow. And so you often find yourself, I mean, this board is relatively big. It's a relatively big board. And so when you're playing with more people, I mean, most of the games that I played, truthfully, I wasn't actually sitting down, but I was actually kind of like halfway standing up, leaning over the table, trying to find cards. So you're trying to find cards and combo cards with your other ones, and it makes it so hard because the text on all the cards are so small. So while turns do feel quick, because the text on the cards are so small, that time where everyone's like, okay, can you pass me that card? Or what does that card say again? Or what is that one? That's what, for me, can sometimes bring this game kind of to a screeching halt a little bit. So I wish that they would have, shrunken the artwork a little bit, or even just used a slightly bigger, different type of text that wasn't so narrow and long. Another thing with this game, which might just be me thing, but for those of you who know me, I'm like a huge thematic gamer. This game is very mechanical. There's very little theme. I feel like Scythe, in a weird way, is actually more thematic than this game is, because I feel like in Scythe you have even those random encounter cards that get flipped over. I think they're called encounter cards that get flipped over, and you have certain options that you can do, and you can do this to gain this, or do this to gain this. But for me, this game is really just a mechanical game. You're trying to figure out ways to efficiently run your engine and run your actions in such a way that you can gain the most points. And so there even are cards in this deck that are quest cards. Like for example, this one it says befriend a local legend. Okay, that's like this quest. That really doesn't matter, at all. This could say, marry a unicorn. Nothing matters in regards to what you're doing on the quest. All that matters is right here, this side of the card, where you have to be on the central 12 location, and you have to give up 2 guile to then gain a worker, you have to give up 2 power to gain a worker and some guile. That's really it. There's nothing about this game that speaks anything to the theme. It really could be any theme. Really, this is just a mechanical engine game where you're trying your best to efficiently run your actions along with your cards. And so for some people, they really like that. For some people, I could see how that could be a really big, great thing for them. And the engine is fun and the gameplay is fun. But for me, it just lacks that theme enough. And especially where I'm a very thematic gamer, I just wish there would have been a little bit more of the theme implemented in this game in certain ways. So another thing I wasn't a huge fan of were these mech tiles, and especially the mech abilities. So every mech kind of comes with a different ability. There are definitely some abilities that are better than others, and some that there's even one that in my opinion felt kind of pointless, there's really no point to it. So I wish that those would have been tweaked a little bit more. These boards are also kind of hard because as you are tucking cards, you're not just tucking cards in one direction that you have to worry about. You're actually tucking cards from 3 different directions, from the top, the side, and the bottom. And so the game actually comes with little stickers that go on the back of the boards. The hopes with those stickers is that it'll raise the board a little bit, so when you're tucking cards, it doesn't shift so much. But unfortunately, my boards actually came slightly warped. They're kind of bent a little bit, so those stickers didn't do anything to help raise the board at all. But as you're tucking cards, because you're tucking cards on 3 different sides, inevitably, when you go to tuck again, everything shifts. So every single time you tuck a card, you kind of have to like re-center your board. You have to shift everything around again, which can be a little bit annoying. So the other thing are these power and guile tokens that actually sit on this side of your board. These are just simply too big. They don't even fit well. It's kind of, I wish that there were either 2 tracks, like one for power, one for guile, then they would have actually fit a lot better. But because both of these 2 relatively big tokens share this kind of tiny track, they get messed up like a lot. There are times where I was like, okay, wait, was my guile on 2 or was my power on 6 or 7? I can't quite remember. And I said you kind of lean up and hover over the board a lot. There were so many times where I would kind of stand up to look over the board to read the cards. I would come back, look down, and realize that my shirt had actually like moved up these tokens, and I was like, I don't even remember where they are. So I would just kind of have to use my best guess to figure out where they were on my board. So yeah, unfortunately, I didn't like those power or guile tokens. So overall, coming into my final thoughts here in Expeditions, I really did like the game. Like I said at the beginning, I really loved the puzzle that you were trying to do. I loved trying to combo your cards, and when you successfully did, you're able to combo your cards correctly and do exactly what you wanted. It's so satisfying. But at the same time, there are some negatives that kind of bring it down for me. So for me, I'm coming at Expeditions with a 7 out of 10. I do enjoy it and I do like it. And if somebody was like, hey, Carly, like, do you want to play Expeditions, or would you teach me Expeditions? I would be 100% all in, ready to play. But I don't think that it's one that I'll necessarily feel super drawn to pull off the shelf and like be like, hey, let's play Expeditions. For me, the couple stuff that I talked about, especially the lack of theme in the game, was kind of hard for me. It basically is just kind of like a run your engine, kind of do your actions, which is fine. Like I said, it's just not one that I think I will feel particularly drawn to pull off the shelf. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on Expeditions from Stonemaier Games. Huge shout out to Stonemaier Games for sending me this copy to review. If you have played Expeditions, I'm really curious your thoughts. I know so many people are loving this game right now, especially I know Alex from Board Game Co. I think this is like one of his possibly top game of the year. So many people are loving it. So if you have played it and you really loved it, please let me know in the comments below what you particularly enjoyed about it. Like I said, I did like it, just probably not one that's like my favorite. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today as I share my thoughts on this game. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will see you next time. So last year, me and Jordan went with our best friends to see Top Gun Maverick. Now, I grew up watching Top Gun, so I figured I would like Top Gun Maverick, but obviously I was obsessed with it once we watched it. And I remember we walked out of the theater and we were chatting about the movie, and I said, guys, we need to make call signs for each other. So our friend who's a dentist, we gifted him the call sign Jaws. Our other friend who is an amazing photographer, we figured that she would be F-stop. My husband, who is a clothing designer, we figured Gucci because, I mean, that's just perfect, Gucci. And for me, well, my call sign is checkmate.